Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be shedding light on what causes a job loss. So, what causes precipitate the onset of a job loss? Without further ado, without further delay, allow me to demystify that answer to that inquiry right here, right now. Lamentably, much to my dismay, much to my consternation, much to my chagrin, much to my distress, much to my agony, and much to my grief, the causes behind a job loss are multitudinous, and they extend far beyond the ambit of just a job being outsourced or a job being offshored. At any given moment, an employer can terminate, furlough, or lay off their employees. You never want to be tethered to an employer for income. It is a calamitous, direful recipe for disaster. You never want that to be your perpetual plight, to say the least. Lamentably, employers view their employees as expendable, exploitable, harvestable capital livestock. They also view them as labor cost liabilities, even though the employees are the backbone behind the company's profitability and profound success. They are incentivized, they are enticed, they are encouraged to displace their employees with robots, artificial intelligences, algorithms, as well as automated processes. They do not want to expend a penny on labor costs. The goal of a company is to maximize the wealth of their shareholders and maximize their profits, which is not conducive to maximizing the well-being of their employees. They view their employees as cogs in the wheel. It is quite unfortunate, but it is what it is. Furthermore, when you work an employee job, if you work a real private sector job based on voluntary demand for an employer, you are often working a dead-end, highly time-consuming, debilitating, minimum wage, dispiriting, unfulfilling, undesirable, harrowing, distressful, brutally wretched, ineffably agonizing job that does not pay anywhere close to even 1/4 of a subsistence wage. Moreover, when you work a real private sector job based on voluntary demand, you are often borrowing equity out of your time, life, happiness, health, dignity, and future wealth just for a pittance of a non-subsistence wage. Furthermore, when you work a real private sector job based on voluntary demand for an employer, it often induces chronic stress, chronic fatigue, chronic burnout, chronic inflammation, and adversely impinges on every facet of your life. It undermines your well-being, happiness, dignity, health, and future wealth. It is dispossessing you of your time needed to pull yourself out of the muck and mire and get out of poverty. As you are acutely aware, the only way to get out of poverty is to have your income generating assets as an aggregate generate enough revenue to offset your recurring expenses. You need your recurring revenue streams as an aggregate to generate enough revenue to offset your recurring expenses. You never want your income to be tethered to your time. That, unfortunately, is a calamitous, direful recipe for disaster, which will redound to your disadvantage. If you have your income perpetually tethered to your sacrosanct, indispensable, precious, finite, invaluable time, you never want to be bereft of your time. You want to be able to earmark it prudently, shrewdly, and wisely, and not mismanage it. Do not be desultory. Do not be gormless. Do not be unwise about how you allocate your time. So, to recapitulate, a job loss can transpire for any venial, paltry, trivial, nonsensical, asinine reason. The arbitrary discretion of an employer can culminate in an employee's job loss. And remember, they always view their employees as expendable, exploitable, harvestable capital livestock to be harvested for profiteering purposes. It is lamentable, but it is what it is. If they can find cheaper laborers, then they'll be all the more inclined to terminate you. If you're negligibly tardy due to working a multitude of jobs, they'll be all the more inclined to terminate you. If you encroach on one of their arbitrary policies, they'll be all the more inclined to terminate you. If your job can be displaced by robots, artificial intelligences, algorithms, automated processes, they'll be all the more inclined to terminate you. If one person can work a multitude of jobs, they'll be all the more inclined to terminate you. It can be any reason. It doesn't have to have a modicum of merit. Maybe they detest and disdain your personality. However, there are other reasons as to why you can get terminated, furloughed, or laid off beyond the aforementioned reasons. A company can become defunct at any given moment due to the incompetence of upper-level management. Furthermore, a company can become unprofitable. They can downsize a division. So when you work for an employer, you have no semblance of job security nor job stability if you work a real private sector job based on voluntary demand on behalf of an employer. These types of jobs often pay a non-subsistence wage, and they provide no basis for a future. And based on the disparity in the pay grade between the CEO and the system manager, they deem 2 hours of the system manager's time to be commensurate to 1 second of the CEO's time. So that pretty much encapsulates just how bleak and grim your future prospects are if you work for an employer. They do not care if you can attain your utmost lowest level of needs, relegated to Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid. They do not care if you can afford food, nor housing, nor utilities. In life, you need to be a pioneer of your own destiny, and you want to be able to actualize your latent potential and manifest the quintessential version of yourself into reality. Do not put yourself in this dire, precarious predicament. Do not be dependent on any employer for an infinitesimal, non-subsistence, measly minimum wage. Furthermore, do not relinquish your sacrosanct, indispensable, finite, precious, and valuable time for a pittance of a non-subsistence wage. It just does not make any sense. You could be a pioneer of your own destiny. You could build, you can cultivate behemoth brands. You can grow your recurring revenue streams. You do not have to settle for being tethered to an employer in perpetuity. There are other ways to generate revenue outside the scope of just working for an employer. Do not believe that your options are finite, scant, and limited. You have far more options than you believe. Do not erroneously delude yourself into believing that the only way to generate income entails working for an employer. They're never going to pay you a liberal wage. They're never going to even pay you 1/12 of a liberal wage. So there's no basis for a future. You do not need to cogitate it over for a prolonged period of time. You can just pivot out of the employee workforce and embrace entrepreneurial endeavors. You can become a freelancer. You can become a gig economy worker. There are far more options out there than just working for an employer for a modicum of short-term relief. Just remember at any given moment, they can displace you for the most venial, trivial, nonsensical reasons. You can be displaced by robots, artificial intelligences, algorithms, automated processes. Your job could get outsourced or offshored. Furthermore, if the company becomes defunct, then you lose your job. And if they deem you to be in violation of an arbitrary policy, you could lose your job on that basis as well. For instance, if you're negligibly tardy due to working a multitude of jobs, you could lose your job on that basis. So take heed of taking all the requisite measures to be able to manifest a prosperous, auspicious, abundant future into reality. And do everything in your purview to wean yourself off of an employer. Being tethered to an employer for income is a calamitous recipe for disaster, and nothing beneficent, nothing salubrious, nothing fruitful can ever ensue from that. They'll never pay you a liberal wage, let alone even 1/4 of a subsistence wage. They'll always pay you the bare minimum. If they pay you. They may shirk on paying you, which they shouldn't do, but it is what it is. Once again, I hope that you found this video to be enthralling and insightful. Have a blissful day. Goodbye.